Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here for the regular meeting of your Alamosa City Council. I am going to call this meeting to order. Would you join with me and order pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Judy, roll call. Start voting, please. Missing one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Judy, I'm sorry.
There you go. We have a quorum with 5 present. Councilors Griego and Vigil have requested to be excused.
Thank you, Judy. Next up is the agenda approval. Are there any changes or modifications to the agenda, Judy?
I motion we approve the agenda as presented and excuse Councilors Vigil and Griego.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Start voting, please. Judy?
The motion carries unanimously.
Next up is citizen comment, and I don't have any cards, I believe. So we'll move on then to we'll just move on to ceremonial items. And Dawn? Thank you for being here, Don.
Oh, a little over a month ago, we found out we needed a facilities manager, and we started scratching our heads and said, what exactly do you want from a facilities manager? So we started writing up a description, and in the end, it had Mike's name all over it. Mike comes to us. He's a Valley native, graduated from Centauri. He has essentially been a facility manager for 2 different housing authorities down there for the last, 7 years, I believe? So he comes to us experience and the right kind of experience. He has the right kind of skills, and he has taken a hold very well in the short time he's been here. 2 weeks now? Okay. Again, he's a Valley native. He lives here in Alamosa, and one of the first questions he asked after the interview, when it was his turn to ask questions, is, can you give him time off for a honeymoon? And said, yeah, we could probably work that out. So I give you Michael Abeda, our new facility manager.
Thank you, Don. Mike?
I just want to say, thank you guys for the opportunity. I look forward to serving you guys in the city of Alamosa. Like Don said, I come with 7 years experience in multiple fields, and I'm also a volunteer firefighter, so I'll help you guys out either way. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and welcome. And how was the honeymoon?
It will be July 14th,
Oh,
so it's
okay. Well,
down the road a little bit.
congratulations,
Yeah, it's
and
coming down
welcome
the
to
road.
the city of Alamosa,
So,
Mike.
thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Keep in mind, we've got somewhere north of $50 million in facilities that he's going to be taking care of for us, so it's a very responsible job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Now we'll move on to consent calendar A, which is the award of bid, paint striping machine, receive the February 2014 expenditure report, approve minutes of the regular meeting March 5, 2014, and receive the February 2014 monthly reports. Are there any questions?
If there's no questions, Mayor, I move we approve consent calendar A as presented.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? None. Start voting, please. Judy?
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Judy. We'll move on to regular businesses, presentations from outside agencies, and we have ACED annual update. Thank you for being here, Randy. Appreciate your presence.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the chance to come before you and let you know a little bit about what we've been doing. I was going to say that I was embarrassed, but I think I have to say that I'm excited because most of what I had put together for my presentation tonight, you just heard in the form of the presentation from City. And I'm excited because I've been able to be part of taking economic development to the next level this last year. It's been a very good year, and I'm really excited about where we're headed right now. And I appreciate Council's commitment to economic development right now. It's a huge, huge part of where we need to be headed, in my opinion. And the investment, I think, will be realized several-fold in the future. First of all, I need to make it clear that the Alamosa County Economic Development Corporation represents not only ACED, but also the Chamber of Commerce and Small Business Development Center here in Alamosa. And because my RFQ included all those organizations, this will be a little bit of an overview of all of those organizations. Sometimes those lines get blurred a little bit as we use existing resources from all three organizations to handle projects. All three have fairly clear designed roles right now, though. So I think this will be pretty straightforward. The Chamber of Commerce is working with and for existing businesses through educational meetings, which are also geared heavily towards networking, which I think is the primary reason for the Chamber of Commerce. Our Chamber Business Network meeting, which is held the second Wednesday of each month at the Bistro Rialto. And if you haven't been, I would encourage you and invite you strongly to join us. I think you'll enjoy it from a business standpoint and from a networking standpoint of the community as well. But it's geared strongly towards networking, actually on steroids is kind of the way we talk about it, because the networking is so strong. We provide business education and a business help forum as part of that as well, which has been the strongest draw as long as we can facilitate that. It takes a little bit more time to make sure that that happens. But what we do is we'll bring a business in some state of challenge or need and let them present their challenges. And then I'll try and have people in the audience that can answer their questions as they present them. So it's been, you know, I can answer their questions, they can ask me for advice, and I can give them expert advice. I'm kind of joking there, guys. You can loosen up a little bit. But if their peers offer that advice, it seems to sink in a little bit better. And so that's one of the reasons that meeting works so well. We've had about between 40 and 50 people at recent meetings. Before that, it wasn't quite so good. And the only difference that I can think of that we changed is our meetings used to be on city council nights. So evidently everybody was coming to your meetings. Now they're coming to ours too. So that was a good change. But it's brought literally thousands of dollars of documented business from the networking alone to the people who have attended. In fact, we've got a couple of businesses who have gotten literally thousands of dollars in and of themselves. So it's been a great meeting for us. The Chamber also is currently either working with other community entities such as the city and CVB on events that you guys sponsor, or we hold the events that we sponsor ourselves and you all help us with those. Luckily, we've got each other to rely on when we hold these events, but that would be such as the barbecue event that we held last year. Thank you very much for the support you gave us, and I came before council last year asking for cash support, and you were very generous with that. But Heather talked a little bit in the work session about some of the in-kind things that you've done for events. I can't tell you how much support we got from the city for that barbecue event. It was incredible. Everything that was asked was done and done quickly, and it made the event very successful. So I can't thank you enough for all the help that you gave me on that. ACEDC works to bring new businesses to Alamosa, be it through recruitment or projects such as the Pink Elephant, or when we're possibly somebody is looking at locating a business here, and we do everything that we can to help make that happen. For instance, when Jackie Kennedy came to town with Nestle's, I spent at least a couple of days showing her around the community and looking at empty buildings and places that might fit, showing her locations that would work for that kind of a business. And she was able to find a decent location. I think it's going to be a great location that she's found now and she's working on. Since then, almost every step of the way, I've helped her in some way or another, or my office has. Most recently, I think earlier this week, we talked about marketing and some of the things that she could do with marketing. And I think it's been very, very beneficial for her, and we're really excited to see her going. We were all kind of hoping when she started that Cinnabon would be part of that as well, but it didn't quite work out, so we're still excited that she's bringing a Nestle store to town. But we've had a small effect, at least, on other businesses. Anytime Fitness, we worked with them a little bit before they ever got opened, and we worked with them a little since then on various issues that have come up and challenges that they've needed. We helped the Hookah Lounge come to town. And I've been working with another possible business over the last month to fill another empty building here in town as well, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks we'll be able to announce that that's going on. I, along with city staff, have spent, and this is where things kind of overlap a little bit, and I think, you know, it's going to be easy to see how closely we've been working together and how much I appreciate city staff, and Heather and her team have provided resources that I've only been dreaming about in the last 2 years of being able to use, and it's been extremely beneficial, I think, for both of us. But I, along with city staff, have spent a significant amount of time working with Buxton, and we talked a lot about Buxton. But I've worked with the software and the company. We've used Buxton materials and other connections to help over a dozen businesses this last year. Buxton's been very helpful as a company in providing resources to help us as we put together that wish list that we talked about of retail businesses that we'd like to approach at the ICSC show. And they've even offered their meeting room at that show. As we attend, we can use that meeting room to meet with these businesses. So we're looking forward to setting that up. They also gave us a little bit of information as far as who the contacts were and how we need to go about setting up those meetings. So they've been very, very helpful for us, a good resource. One thing I think is a bit of a special note. We all know how economic development is tied to the crime rate, and I think council's had plenty of discussion on the negative side of that issue. But on the positive side, I worked with Captain Dingfelder, Colorado State Patrol, to provide some numbers out of Buxton for a statewide project that they were doing, and they were extremely excited about it because they couldn't get those numbers anywhere else, and it helped them move forward with that project. I've also been working with a group called the Center for Business Excellence that helps existing businesses with challenges that they may be having, trying to figure out where those challenges are and how to address them before they get serious. It's made up of basically a think tank of economic development professionals here in town, from the business department at Adams State University to DRG, SBDC, and ACEDC as well. We've worked with at least a handful of clients already, and I think our biggest challenge going forward is that there's too big a list out there for us to be able to handle in businesses that are in need of our help, but it's been very beneficial for those that we have been able to help so far. Council already has a pretty clear picture of what SBDC is and who they are and what they do, but they generally help local people who are looking to start businesses, as well as helping existing businesses grow through educational seminars and one-on-one counseling, and it's all free to everybody and confidential. Those are the two most important parts of it. One of the things that I'd like to mention, though, is that even though we've got 3 organizations underneath and included with ACID, we all work together very closely on many of the projects that we do. For instance, SBDC is a co-sponsor of the Chamber Business Network meetings that we do, and it works out extremely well because they can provide businesses in need that may have challenges for our Business Help Forum. So if they can provide those people that are looking for something, and at some level or another, I can get together with them, find out what those needs are, and then find people that can help them answer those questions. Networking is a huge part of success in this country, be it business or whatever it may be, but economic development is no different. Developing the network, unfortunately, takes a lot of time. It's like building the foundation of the house, and you as council don't see a lot of the things that happen sometimes in building that foundation, and I know that you'd like to see the walls raising while we're building that foundation. But it is extremely important, and without that foundation, the walls won't stand. But I've worked hard developing those relationships, whether it be with the city and the city staff and the turnover that has happened with you and with staff. The same with the county. We've got a new county administrator out there in Pete Kempfer, and I think he's a strong player in economic development going forward. I'm excited to have him on board. DRG, EDCC is a statewide economic development seminar that Heather and Pat and Amanda and I have committed to going to this year, not only for the resources and education that we can receive at that seminar, or that series of seminars, but for the networking as well, because there's people from all over the state that are doing the same jobs we are, and we can start hooking up with those people. It's been very beneficial for me in the last 2 years, so I'm looking forward to that. Downtown Colorado is a good resource, or has been a good resource for me. Catherine Carell is the executive director of that. She's invited me to different events that I've been able to attend free around the state. Most recently, we talked with communities around the state who have successful URAs and others who are looking at the possibility of starting a URA. And it was very educational for me, and I think we've got some things to talk about and look at going forward. Dr. Mike Tomlin and Adams State University, especially with the School of Business over there. Mike Tomlin has been an extremely valuable resource within the chamber. He comes to every chamber board meeting, and he's very valuable in ACID and various other situations that I've needed his advice with. And his whole business department has been part of various things going forward, or going in our meetings as well. As a matter of fact, this week I just taught 2 of Liz Thomas's classes about economic development, so I've spent 2 hours over there teaching, which is kind of a payback for what they do for me. TSJC and Carmen Simone, everything I've asked, she's been willing to take on whatever they need to do for workforce development or whatever it may be. They're excited about where they can fit in the community as well. And the Workforce Center, obviously, the relationships there, I've known a lot of those people for a lot of years anyway, but figuring out how they fit into some of these things has been valuable as well. As well as the Upper Rio Grande Economic Development, we've been working with them to make sure that we're coordinating what's going on both ends of the valley. And I think it was mentioned earlier that what happens in the rest of the valley affects Alamosa as well, so we're excited to be able to help them out when we can too. But to drill down a little bit deeper into the actual economic development, the city team and I have been identifying and pursuing targeted growth. We've used Buxton to find areas of high retail leakage. And we talked a little bit about the leakage, and you saw an explanation of one of the reports of leakage. But let me give you a little bit more about that, and that would be in the clothing area that we talked about. Now, I think he was drawing a 15-minute radius is what he showed you on the report there. But the one that I try to use as much as we can, and we talked about the challenges of being able to use that, is the one that basically describes the whole San Luis Valley. And I use a 45-mile radius for that. And it shows a retail clothing leakage in the San Luis Valley of $20 million a year. That means that people within the San Luis Valley are buying $20 million of clothing outside the San Luis Valley somewhere or another. Now that's huge, guys. We need to capture that in some way or another. So we look at some of these major companies like Kohl's or Ross or something like that, and we wonder whether they'd be interested in coming. And we may have ideas, maybe we've talked to individual stores and we know that they may be looking, but we need to go talk to them. But one of the other things that we don't keep, or we don't take into account there when we're looking at clothing is, Kohl's, for instance, does department store products as well. Well, if you drill down a little bit further on that leakage chart, you'll find out that there's another $16 million in department store leakage. There's $36 million that Kohl's could realize, or at least realize a good section of, if they were to locate here. I'm confident that if we can sit down at the table with them at that ICSC show, we'll at least get their attention when we tell them there's $36 million here that they could have a chance of capturing. Sure, we've got to show them exactly how they're going to do it. But if they're looking already, it may be exactly what we need to do to take them over that edge. We've developed that list of retailers that fit those needs. We're very careful about doing that with cannibalization in mind, that Heather was very good about explaining in the work session. But there are other things that we've used as criteria for that. We used the Buxton leakage, and she also mentioned that there may be some things that leakage doesn't show we need, but we all know we need. For instance, sporting goods on that sheet shows that we're oversold right now in sporting goods. But if you break down the sporting goods, it shows that we're oversold in things like what Bob Carlucci sells. He does a very good job of presenting products that this community needs, and he sells very well. And he'll actually go out of the community to northern New Mexico and sell those products as well. That's why we're oversold in that category. But if you look at some of the things like hunting and fishing, maybe we're not so oversold there. So maybe we're looking at something that Buxton tells us we may not need, but we all know we need, and we could justify it. It goes back to the if you build it, they will come kind of an idea. And Walmart shows that what Walmart's selling shows as a 1.4 on that scale. It means it's oversold. People from outside of Alamosa, outside the San Luis Valley, are coming into the San Luis Valley and shopping at Walmart, almost half again as many. We know that some of those people are tourists, but we know some of them are coming from Taos and even as far as Espanola or Walsenburg. And they're coming to Alamosa to shop at our Walmart, and I've got actual documentation of that. Let's see, as part of all of that trip to ICSC and so on, we are identifying target areas for new development, redevelopment, and growth. We're looking at areas around the community, and I think Pat was pretty good at explaining a lot of what we're doing as far as targeting some of those areas. One of the things that he didn't mention, just forgot, I know, because we've talked about it, is some of the developers that are here. They may not be real estate, and they may not be property owners, but maybe they're developers and so on that are also included. There are a couple of people here in the community that have attracted business on their own, but maybe they have a little bit of extra room in some of the facilities they have now that need to be filled. So we're looking at helping them fill those existing facilities as well. And Pat has done a great job, the whole team has done a great job of providing appropriate maps and identifying the infrastructure needs that we're going to have. And they talked about that in the work session as well. That all helps us put together the presentation packets that they were talking about. Those presentation packets are going to be specific to the businesses that we talk to. There will be some generalities. If we talk to two different clothing businesses, they'll be pretty similar. But there'll be some differences too, because they may have differences in requirements that they're looking for as far as sites are concerned. So we'll make sure that those packets are specific to those businesses. And we're trying to identify the best way to leave those businesses with an impression that they need to come to Alamosa to find out on the ground what it is that we have to offer. And once they get here and they see some of the examples that we have to show them, McDonald's, Sonic, Walmart that had to build the superstore, some of those ideas, Bell's that's setting records in their company, Anytime Fitness that in their first quarter is almost hitting their dream goals. All of those kinds of things we've got to show them when they get here. So we're looking forward to that. But I think, and it was touched on in the work session, the elephant in the room is sustainability. We've begun a plan toward making our economic development efforts sustainable. But first, that includes focusing on the strengths of the economic development groups in the community now. We need to ensure that these groups are effectively working together and that we're accomplishing the overall needs of the community. We're a community of roughly 9,000 people, and it depends on how you count that, whether we count the people on the other side of the river, whether we count the people at Adams State University, whether we count the rest of the San Luis Valley. But it really doesn't matter because the resources are limited anyway. Those resources are the people that we have to draw on to get these things done, the money that we have to make sure that we can get these things done. And we have to figure out the best way that we can allocate all of those resources to get the highest potential. And if we intend to be serious about economic development, we need to get better at finding ways of resourcing and funding economic development in general. And I'm talking about in serious funding. You know, we look at some of the other communities out there that we're competing against, and we're not even close. I know that there's several definitions of economic development. For some, it's primary jobs. For others, it's filling holes in retail services. And yet for others, it's community development, such as infrastructure and the arts. My definition probably would include all three. Before you can bring retail, though, you have to have effective water, sewer, lights, maybe internet. Bringing real manufacturing, you're probably going to have what I call social infrastructure, and that is you get people that are making significant amounts of money that are heads of manufacturing firms, you're going to have shopping close by, and the arts would fit into that as well. So if our closest shopping is 2 hours away, it's going to be very tough to bring those kinds of primary job producing companies to Alamosa. But does that mean that we can't try to get those primary jobs right now? No, not at all. Number one, we can try and get them anyway. But number two, we can work with some of the companies that we have here right now that are producing primary jobs. We've got tourism for one. Those are primary jobs because they're bringing money into the valley that wasn't here in the first place and gets to be spent again. But there are a few businesses here in Alamosa, for instance, Rustic Log Furniture. Started from basically nothing, and he's got 50 employees, and I'm just throwing that number out, it's close to that. But he's selling products all over the world, and that money's coming back to Alamosa. That's a primary job. We can help him grow. Colorado Choice, our own HMO, they're servicing many areas along the Front Range now, and that money's coming back to Alamosa as well. Those are primary jobs. They've done a great job of growing. P-Tech with Roger Scher out at the airport, manufacturing LED products. Doesn't have a huge amount of employees out there, but that's manufacturing right here. Those are the kinds of things that we can work with and work towards to try and increase those kinds of businesses. We can use SBDC and some of the resources that they have to try and help those people develop those smaller companies that hopefully can develop over time. And we can also try and help those bigger companies to grow. One of the things that I'd like to say in closing, though, I mentioned that we have a new county administrator in Pete Kempfer. And Pete was at our retreat this weekend. And one of the things that Pete said was, and Pete his background is economic developer. He's a certified economic developer, and he's worked in various communities around the country in that niche. One of the things he said made him come to Alamosa was how much we've been able to accomplish in economic development with how little resources. And he's convinced if this community will get behind economic development in a serious way, that we can really make some strong gains in economic development. I appreciate everything that you guys have done very, very much. We look forward to another year. Hopefully in another year it'll be even more exciting than this year has been. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Council, do you have any questions or comments of Mr.
Randy, I have a question for you. But first of all, I would like to thank you for the hard work that you put out in our community. I see you just about at every event and everywhere, and I receive your emails on a daily basis, so keep up the great work.
Well, I see you at those events too, Ty. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. My question is, you mentioned earlier that in the retail clothing outlet area, we're losing somewhere in the area of $20 million in leakage. What are we doing right now to work with our current retail outlets to make sure that they're able to capture some of those dollars? That's
a really good question, Ty, and I think, we can even open it up and answer the question right. JCPenney's is who we're talking about. Everybody knows where JCPenney's is nationwide right now, and it's not good. I think they're showing signs of recovery, but it's pretty limited at best right now. We've got a situation in the community where we've got some free land downtown for development, if it's the right development, and one of those things is a big box store. And so the first thing that happened when that was offered was I went to talk to JCPenney's about the possibility of building a new store there. It was their 100-year celebration. They were turning 100 years in Alamosa, and we thought it was the perfect fit to be asking for that right now, rewarding a company that's done well for Alamosa in the past with the possibility of an easier way of rebuilding. And they were very interested. And I think they would still be very interested if they were a little bit better off corporate-wise. So we've looked at other ways of the possibility of expanding where they're at. And there's possibilities there. There's businesses or buildings on either side that might be available for expansion for them. The biggest challenge that we might have if they did that is parking. So Heather and Pat and I have been working, in fact, Pat and I spent about 3 hours last week beginning a parking plan for downtown Alamosa. And that's a big part of it, is trying to be able to take care of what may happen if they do increase where they're at, being able to take care of the parking where they're at. So that is a good question. We definitely don't want to forget who we already have. We want to dance with those that brung us,
Okay. Thank you so very much, Randy.
certainly.
Randy, how long have you been heading up these groups?
2 years, a little over 2
I was
years.
thinking it was 2 or 3. It hadn't been very long,
No.
and you've got a lot done. There's a lot of things happening, and thanks to you, you drive a lot of that. We're missing that element, I believe. And you've taken that and done a very good job. I'm a little concerned that maybe we may be wearing you thin, running all 3 groups, but I think that's a discussion down the road.
Have you been talking to my wife?
No, we haven't been able to have lunch forever, right? Your schedule's full. But the city appreciates what you're doing, and we'd like to help you any way we can, if we can.
Rusty, there is no way that I could have done anything that I've done had it not been for the financial and in-kind and just staff support that I've been able to get from the city. It has been tremendous.
And I'm glad to hear that. And thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Yes, Randy, can you give us a little bit of an update on the Pink Elephant project?
I didn't think I was probably going to get out of here without that. The holdup right now is sign off from the State Historical Society. And Don, speaking of help, Don put the whole presentation to the Historical Society together for me. And it's not an easy presentation to do. And once we got it sent off, it doesn't actually go to the Historical Society. It actually goes to my EPA Brownfields rep. And once we got it there, I'm sorry, this just cracks me up, but it's so indicative of what I've gone through over the last 6 months in trying to work with this Brownfields grant. She said not only did she have to notify the State Historical Society, but she also had to notify Tribal as well and see if there was anything that they had to say that might hold this up. I won't tell you how I answered that to Dawn, but it wasn't really nice. I guess I could probably, this is something I've been thinking about over the last week. We worked very, very hard at getting that $200,000 grant from EPA Brownfields. And I'm not sure that if we had done it without, we would have definitely done it faster, and we might have been able to do it just as cheaply as we're able to do it now. The hoops that I've had to jump through and everything that's happened, I have to pay Davis-Bacon wages because I'm using Brownfields on the whole project, which eats up a whole huge bunch more money than what we would have had to spend. Several other different things, an extra sampling of the whole facility. Colorado Air Quality got involved and made us sample the whole facility again and test it again, which actually turned out well for us in the long run because it showed that there's less asbestos in the building than what they'd originally thought. But it still put me behind an extra month and a half. All of these things have added up, and it's just been, you know, I come from the business world. And when we make a decision in the business world, it's usually done by nightfall. And if not, then by the next day. And if it's not, you lost money. I've been waiting on this for I don't know how long just to try and get a contractor hired to oversee the contractor that's going to do the actual abatement. And so it's been a huge headache and a nightmare. However, all of that is getting very close to being behind us. We're very close to having SHPA sign off on that. And once they sign off on that, we will be ready to start the abatement. I know that council has been involved in communications about the one building that's still remaining, the Sick and Twisted building. And Flint and I have been in communications about that building and whether it might be available at a more reasonable cost. And I think he's ready to talk to us. We don't have a number yet. But I appreciate council's considerations of helping us go further with that if we need some financial help there as well. It's a big part of that project because As it stands, we probably will realize about half of the project size. If we can get the sick and twisted, it doubles the project because it opens up the whole parking lot area as well. And it makes it a much more viable and much more exciting project moving forward. So it is a big part of what we need to do. On the other hand, we're going to have to be fiscally responsible about how we handle that, and we can't just, throw a bunch of money at it just to make it happen either. Time frame, depending on how the Historical Society comes back, if they come back in a reasonable amount of time, I would think by summertime we could easily have a shovel-ready lot.
Another part of the update that I was going to offer during staff time, but would be more appropriate at this point in time, Randy and I are scheduled to meet with the county commissioners to be on their agenda next week. Part of that is stemming from the joint breakfast that you held with the commissioners of what kind of partnership could exist there to close some of the gap in the funding. And so Randy and I are scheduled for the 26th to make a presentation. I was also going to probably offer to council if one or two of you wanted to attend as well. So it is seen as a continuation from those discussions that began at the breakfast.
Anything else?
Thank you, Randy. It's obvious that you and the chamber are essential cogs and partners in economic development for not only the city, but the county, as well as the entire San Luis Valley. And for that, we thank you. We wish you and Heather and Pat good luck at
And
that
Amanda.
ICS conference.
Thank
you very much for your update. It's invaluable information that we need and keeps us in the loop. Thank you very much, Randy.
Thank you, Mayor.
Next up, Council, we've got Public Works, final plat, Carroll Project Development Group, LTD. Don?
As you mentioned, this is indeed a final plat, so we have to have a public hearing on the subject. This particular lot is directly north of the one we did our permitted use for 2 years ago for the apartment building that is currently there. The next item on the agenda actually is another permitted use for exactly the same thing, although it's slightly different configuration. As I mentioned the communique, the property was originally developed in 2002. That's when the street, sewer and water, stormwater, all those things were actually installed. So all the infrastructure is in place. The only thing remaining is the sidewalk, and that is typically a condition of the building permit. Does anybody have any question on the plat itself?
Council?
Thank you.
If there are no questions, then I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on Resolution number 4, 2014, a resolution approving the final plat of filing number 6 of the Carroll Business Park, City of Alamosa, Alamosa County, Colorado. Anyone speaking in favor or against this resolution? Dan?
Dan McCann, 1809 Sunset, Alamosa. I know everybody in the city council. I know them real well. And Heather is great. She does her homework. And unlike a lot of males, she doesn't have an ego problem. She's a good woman, and males have ego problems, and it causes trouble. And my ego is so big, sometimes I have to wear crutches to keep from falling over. That's just Dan McCann. Now, the county does really good. Everybody's very honest, and I know everybody. I've been political in this community for years, and this is a good project. Anything that's going to help out business, you want to be behind. And Don does a good job with Public Works. And it's my understanding we're going to lose him. That's going to be a major loss. People do a good job here, and everything is public. There's not a bunch of, yes, people talk and stuff, but if you have a couple of councilors together, they can't be together. There's certain rules about what the law is for our public officials, so they don't do sneaky things. And by the way, what these people make up here, except for the mayor, who's highly paid. He might make $1 an hour. The rest of them make about 25 cents an hour. So if anybody wants to run for public office, especially in the city, good luck. You don't do it for money. Vote for this thing. It's a good project.
Thank you, Mr. McCann. Is there anyone else? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on resolution number 4, 2014, and bring it back to council for discussion or a decision.
If there's no discussion, I'll make the motion that we approve resolution number 4, 2014, a resolution approving the final plat of filing number 6 of the Carroll Business Park, City of Alamosa, Alamosa County, Colorado.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Brief discussion before you vote, council. Just to clarify for the record, the packet prepared for the meeting did not include the plat, which we were just displaying for the public hearing. That plat, that was an oversight. That plat will be attached as Exhibit A to the resolution for approval. That's the plat for the Carroll Business Park Filing 6.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay.
All right. Council, start voting, please. Judy?
Motion carries unanimously.
Next up on the list is accept the Planning Commission's recommendation to approve the request of Carroll Project Development Group, LTD, for a perimeter use by special review, permitted use by special review to allow a multifamily dwelling in a commercial business zone, use Group R4. The property affected is Lot 10, Carroll Business Park, Filing 6, located in the Northwest Quarter, Section 5, Township 37, North Range 10 East, New Mexico Prime Meridian, lying generally south of Carroll Street on Cielo Azul. Don?
Well, as I mentioned on the previous discussion, this is to put another multifamily dwelling unit, another apartment building, just north of the existing apartment building. On the last lot, there were 2 buildings. On this lot, there will be only 1, along with parking on the other side and, kind of a picnic area, I believe you said, James? On the west side of the lot. The other project is essentially complete. There's still a little bit of landscaping that has to go in, but of course that's weather dependent. You can't do that in the middle of the winter time. So that project has worked well, and you would like to continue the project, basically. Questions?
Council?
Don, I'm assuming that all of the requirements are fulfilled on their part as
That
far
is
as
correct, sir.
paving, curb and gutter and all that?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, council, entertain a motion.
Mayor, if there's no other questions, then I move that council approves the permitted use by special review for multifamily resident units in a commercial business zone per Planning Commission's recommendation.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, start voting, council. Judy?
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, council. Next up is award of bid utility service truck. Don? Maybe you just better stay up here.
One of the interesting things when you do a budget in June and July and actually start writing specs for things in November, December timeframe is sometimes there's a disconnect. And I'll take full responsibility for this one. I envisioned at the time that we were putting the budget together that we're going to buy another truck basically like what we had. which was a 3/4-ton service truck with a bumper crane. I think it was in November when our storm drain pump just outside of the city hall here stopped functioning. We had to pull it out of the wet well to see what's wrong with it, and ultimately sent it out to be repaired. And soon discovered, not really, this was no surprise. I mean, we knew those bumper cranes really were not designed for that size pump, and we pulled it with a backhoe, and that did work. But it's really not a safe operation. It's certainly not the best way to do it. So we looked at how heavy our pumps were, how big a crane we would need to do it properly, and then built a truck that would carry the crane. And what it ultimately came down to is we need a 1.5-ton truck to carry a 4,000-pound crane, along with a service body. So we wrote the specs that way. Basically, we started with the crane and wrote them, working backwards. For what it's worth, the truck was still $30,000. The service body and the crane is the extra money. That's where the extra cost came in. So obviously, this does put us over budget. Our original budget was $30,000. The way we propose to make up for that, we've done two things in the solid waste, in the trash. We were going to buy a used autoload truck, and it was going to be a one-piece rather than a cab and trailer type operation what we have right now. The reason we're going to do that was more to try it out and see if that configuration would work, particularly in our tighter alleys and cul-de-sacs. So we were going to buy a used truck, use it primarily for yard waste, but that would also give us a chance to try it out for the regular service. One of the reasons you want to do that is that cab chassis operation is only available through one vendor, so we were kind of stuck. So we wanted to try something out. So we've been able to do two things, like I say. One is get an extended demo unit. We've got a unit out of the vendor in Nebraska we bought our last truck from that we're going to have for 3 weeks, which will give us the opportunity to basically run it through all the routes under some different conditions and see how well it's going to work for us and see if that's even a viable option. To a large extent, that negates the requirement to buy a used truck. That was budgeted for $50,000. So if we can forego that, and I personally think we can. And then the other thing we did too is rearrange our routes a little bit. So we basically pushed all the residential routes back a day. So we used to run Monday through Thursday, now we run Tuesday through Friday. That opened up Monday to do the yard waste route. So instead of doubling up routes on one day, Tuesday, which is what we were doing before, now we don't have to double up anymore. We've got Monday dedicated just to the yard waste route, and the other 4 days are strictly residential. So it's not as important to have that extra truck out there as well. And I think that's a very doable option. And that would more than make up in the enterprise fund the additional cost for this particular truck. As you can see from the bidders, the actual low bidder, just looking at dollar amounts with Johnson Auto Plaza, they're out of Brighton. The difference, of course, is the 7% allowed under Section 2-184E of our ordinance, which is up to 70%, which is a $38,000 allowance or $3,800 allowance, which makes Town and Country the base. Once you add that factor into there, they would be the most favorable bidder, and we are recommending that the bid be awarded to them for this truck.
Thank you, Don. Any questions of Don?
Don, real quick, Don, it looked like your current truck is a 2002, right? So we could expect about 12 to 14 years out of this
That
new
is
truck?
correct. That's a 2002 3/4 ton. I would expect a little bit better service out of the bigger truck, I would hope, anyway.
Okay.
And like I say, it's got 170,000 miles on it right now, the one we're looking at replacing.
Yeah, they use that, your current one is used extensively, I think. I see it all over the place. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I think safety is a paramount feature for purchasing this vehicle, and so, Council, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I will move the council award the bid for a new Utilities Division service truck to Town and Country Auto Mall in the amount of $57,782.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, Council, start voting. Judy?
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Judy. Council, the next agenda item is authorization of water treatment plant improvements. Dawn?
For what it's worth, Farron Hall, our sewer and water superintendent, is in the audience to answer any technical questions that he has already briefed me on that I can't answer. Starting in April of last year, we started having some problems with the performance of the water treatment plant. And basically what's happening is the membranes, the filters essentially, that we run the water through, were not recovering through the cleans as well as they used to. Basically, you clean those periodically, and it's supposed to recover the flow pressures and amounts and those types of things. But that stopped happening all of a sudden, which is we're still scratching our heads why it happened after 6 years of really excellent performance. There was no tapering off. It just went boom. And I was a little disappointed. Like I say, we've been scratching our heads what exactly is going on. We've talked with various engineering firms. We've talked to people who supply our chemicals to see if anything had changed there. Talked to GE. We actually sent samples of fibers to GE to have them analyze the fibers and see if they could figure out what was going on. And basically, they never really came to a conclusion what was going on. The recommendations were that we go to a much more stringent cleaning schedule that would be longer. It would actually take our trains, the production trains, out of operation for a longer period of time. Of course, that cuts down the capacity of the plant and would consume a great deal of chemicals. And the chemicals alone would have cost us about pretty close to $290,000 a year, just for the chemicals alone. And that doesn't even take into account the labor and the time and how much those things were going to be out of service. The other option would be to replace the membranes themselves at a cost of close to $750,000. That was not a very happy number for us. The expected life of the membranes, incidentally, was 15 years, not 6. So we kept on looking for options. And one thing that we actually knew when we designed the plant, because of the performance that we were getting, we didn't think it was necessary at the time that we built the plant to incorporate it, was that the coagulant, the ferric oxide we use, that basically captures the arsenic, and then the ferric and arsenic are filtered out of the water. We knew that worked better at a lower pH. But again, to the bench tests and pilot tests that we went through, because we were meeting performance without going through that step, we chose not to implement it at the time we built the plant. It looks like we're going to have to implement it at this point. Dropping the pH of the water as it mixes with the ferric does two things. The ferric becomes a much stronger attractant to the arsenic. The other thing that happens is the flock, that is the particles, if you will, of the ferric oxide, are clumped together in larger clumps. So you don't have the real fine, what they call a pin flock, that we're trying to filter out. That pin flock is probably, well, not probably, almost certainly is part of the reason we're having problems getting the membranes clean, because basically get caught up in the pores, 3 micron, which is a very small pore. They're getting caught up in those pores and they're not flushing out very well. So if you've got a larger particle, and of course it's capturing more arsenic, those will filter out much better, and then the cleans will be more effective. There's also an issue with dissolved silica, which is something we've always known with our water. Dissolved silica is an issue. And when it stays dissolved and when it turns to more of a solid is also highly determined by the pH of the water. So hopefully that will help us keep from having the dissolved silica also interfere with the actual filters themselves. We've done some bench testing, which means basically lab testing. You do it in jars and try it on a very small scale. What we're asking you to do here is a pilot test, which is basically a full-scale pilot for the entire plant. The equipment will be leased initially during the pilot period. If the pilot is successful, as we expect it to be, and we choose to buy the system after the test is over, 90% of the cost of the leasing of the equipment will apply to the purchase price. The lease price itself is $4,500 a month. Purchase price, should we choose to exercise that, is $175, as I recall. Make sure I'm not getting my numbers mixed up here. And there's also a mobilization and demob charge involved. We need to do something to get back the effectiveness of the membranes, whether we replace the membranes, whether they go through extended cleans, and again, there's no guarantees those extended cleans are going to take care of the problem. And extended cleans are also expensive cleans, so that's not an option that we're looking forward to. And it's also an ongoing cost. You do that every year. So the payoff in a situation like this is actually probably only around 2 years, maybe a little bit more than that, but pretty close to 2 years, because again, when you look at the options, they're not real good. I'd like to thank Vern and his crew, because they're the ones that did all the research on this and came up with appears to be the best answer. As we talked about on the cost, I said there were a few things that had to be added to the initial proposal. They have added those to the initial proposal, and the cost did not increase, which surprised me a little bit. Obviously, if you approve this, we're going to have to go through a budget adjustment to make it work. It will be coming out of primarily enterprise fund reserves at this stage and basically paid over a period of time. Again, this looks to be the most economical solution to a problem that absolutely needs to be fixed. I'm sure you have questions on this one. I hope I have the answers.
Thank you, Don.
Don, if I remember correctly, we're looking at new regulations for arsenic anyway coming along. Is this system going to help us with that?
This system could very well help us with that. And as I mentioned, when you drop the pH in the water, it makes the attraction to the iron oxide stronger, so the bonds are more effective. So assuming they don't drop it to anything lower than 2 parts per billion, which is what I'm understanding they're looking at, we should be able to meet those new standards with our current system and pH adjustment.
Okay, so this is going to help us more than just
Could
this
very
problem.
well help us in that regard as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Don, did you say that by using chemicals, the cost could be close to $290,000?
For the cleans, yes.
the
Now, we're going to
cleans.
have to use chemicals that adjust to pH too, of course. We've
Okay.
got to drop it down somewhere around 5, and then we have to bring it up somewhere around 7 to 7.5 before we put it back in the distribution system. You can't leave it that low, obviously.
Okay, but by making these improvements, it'll help reduce some of the chemical costs as well overall, or what do you think?
It could potentially save additional cleaning costs, but I certainly don't want to promise that until we've gone through the pilot test. I don't have that answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Don, what's the longevity if you go to this new system?
I'd like to think that the membranes then would last us the 15 years that were initially projected when we built the plant. Again, until we run the pilot test, I can't make any promises, but I will say it will certainly extend the life of the fibers if it works at all like we expect it to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Will there be any additional equipment needed if this pilot project is successful and it turns into a permanent?
The equipment that's going to be needed to do what we want to do is included in the pilot. That is, everything will be installed as part of the pilot. The only thing we're going to have to look at is long-term storage of the chemicals, because we're using more caustic and more acid. We've got to figure out where we're going to put that, how we're going to plumb it. For the pilot period, we've got someplace temporary you can put it. Potentially can make some of that permanent, but until we've got a better feel of an absolute number or a quantity, that is, of chemicals we're going to have on hand at one time and figure out where we're going to put those and how we're going to put it there, that's the part that would have to change, chemical storage. As far as all the equipment, that's included in the pilot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
I've got a question for Heather. Heather, what is the time period in which we would have to rent this in order for us to pay it off? This equipment?
I don't think our intention is to rent it the entire time. I think once we get through the period of time of this summer, we're going to have a good feeling if it works or not.
Oh,
If
okay.
it's working, we would probably then move forward with just purchasing it. If it's not, we may add a few more months to see if there's ways to alter it, but I don't think we anticipate just renting it the entire length of time. It's to get us through a good testing period of time. Is that correct, Don?
That's correct. The testing period that we're anticipating is 3 months. We will have authorization from CDPHE, Colorado Division of Public Health and Environment, to test for up to 6 months, but we fully expect to have all the information we need within 3 months.
And
you.
Don, I understand that we'll be credited back a lot of that lease.
90% of the lease fee will be credited towards the purchase of the equipment, should we choose to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council. Any other questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we authorize the water treatment plant improvements.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Start voting, Council. Judy?
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Council. We'll move on to SID discussion on Walker Road. Thank you, Don.
Last one tonight, I promise. Special improvement districts is something we've not done a lot of in the last 20-some-odd years. This is the second one we'd be looking at. Excuse me. Dealing with Walker Road, which is just on the east side of what most of us call the old Kmart building. Of course, Kmart no longer exists, and currently has Aaron's, Ace Hardware. It's got the new fitness franchise in there. And over by Sears. It's a cul-de-sac coming directly off Highway 160, 285. That was half-built back in 1991 and 92. There were a number of things that were going on back then. Part of it had to do with CDOT and their access permit requirements. There was some question whether or not they were going to let us have an access to the highway at that point. Some of that was driven by concerns with the Super 8 Motel and where their access was going to be coming from. And that is why we required Walker Road to go in as part of the development itself. But again, I'll be quite honest with you, I'm trying to remember when the actual access permit question was resolved. I think it was 1996, almost 4 years after I got here. And again, that whole thing had started in 1991. When it got resolved, and actually before it got resolved, Kmart basically built half a road. And that's what we asked them to do. That's what we required of them to do. First time I've actually seen half a road built. It doesn't work very well. We've only got one other of those in town, and I'm going to tell you where it is. And it predates this one by quite a bit. But we had curb and gutter on the east side of the road, plus 20 foot of pavement. Now, when I say half a road, we're looking at the original design. We'll probably narrow that down, bring that down closer to 26 foot of pavement instead of 40 foot of pavement, which is what the original design was. We won't have any on-street parking. We want to have enough width where a truck or delivery vehicle can turn into any of the lots, so they need a certain amount of turning radius in the road. But 26 foot of pavement should be more than adequate for that. Again, it is a cul-de-sac. It's not a through street, so that makes a difference as well. And it is all commercial, so I don't see any reason to have any on-street parking there. Everybody's got their own parking lot, and I don't expect that to change. So we are currently redesigning that. I would expect to have that done in a couple of weeks. And of course, once we got the design, we'll know quantities and we can do actual cost estimate. At that time, we'll come back to you and ask if you're willing to entertain an SID for this particular project. We started an SID process before, 1998, I believe it was. I'd have to verify that date. I think it was 1998. And we did have some property owners who don't have direct access to the road. They have property abutting the road, but they don't have access to the road, who did not want to be part of an SID back then. And we were trying to do, as they say, a voluntary SID. That basically killed the project at that time. We still have a half-built street 14 years later, 16 years later, actually. And that's, to me, not a situation we want to continue very much longer. We have commercial properties out there that were basically blocked by other properties that are upstream from them, if you will. So that's what we're trying to approach. We'll have the new design, like I say, done in a few weeks. That'll give us a new cost estimate, and we can break that down per lot so everybody knows what the heck they're facing. And then I'd like to bring that back to you and see if we can't get an SID moving on this project. The numbers will be small enough, we would probably finance it out of existing city funds. I would expect a shorter payback period, because we're dealing with commercial firms as opposed to residential units, excuse me, most of whom have a direct interest in having this happen. Again, the same two lots, it's Ferguson Plumbing and Sorum Tractor. At this point, Sorum did not own that property back then, that don't have direct access to the street, that there'll be some pushback, and that's something we'll have to deal with. Are there any questions with where we're
Mr.
going?
Gillespie?
So are you
direction?
proposing a voluntary SID, or would this be
It won't be a
imposed?
voluntary SID. I'll be asking the council to declare an SID, which you can do. I mean, the project's been hanging out there too long, and I really don't think that, that's something we want to leave out there until, for some indeterminate period in the future. We need to clean this thing up.
And we have been approached by several of the property owners who do want it. So it's not necessarily that it would be completely involuntary. There are some who desperately want it, and then there will probably still be some who do not want it.
Are there more than 4 property owners, or just the carpet store, Sears, and
There is,
Sorum
let's see, don't quote me on this, but I'll get pretty close. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, counting the city, because we've got some property ownership out there adjacent to the detention pond behind, again, the old Kmart building, which is what I'm calling it. You've got the Ferguson property, you've got the Sorum tractor, you've got what used to be Gabe's Appliance, is now owned by Owens. They use it for their property management, so they got a lot of equipment and whatnot stored in there. They are talking about potentially putting a shooting range in that building. Then you've got the carpet store, and just north of that is the Sears building itself. You've got two I'm going to call them home/, commercial properties. The one in the northwest corner with frontage on Clark is also an insurance dealer. The one to the east of that, I believe, is strictly a residential property as far as I know. South of that, you've got the Red Cross, and then just south of that, you've got the detention pond, which the city is responsible for.
Could you point to the area?
I've got Counselor Stefano next.
Do you have an estimated cost of this project?
Not yet. We've got to finish up the redesign so we know what the quantities are going to be. Again, we're working on the redesign, should have that in a couple of weeks. We'll come back with you an estimate costs and a potential breakdown by property owner. So, we want to have as much detail as we can before we push this very much forward. The reason I'm bringing this up now is to see if at least you're open to the idea. I don't want to be going through all that work and then you tell us, well, we don't want to consider that. So unless you tell me no, let's put it that way, we're going to continue with that process. But if you want to tell me no, of course, we'll drop it.
Are any of these property owners going to furnish any of the money for the project, or?
Well, that's the whole point of an SID. They'll have to pay it back over time.
Okay, thank you, Don.
Thank you, Michael. Rusty?
Don, have the two that aren't involved or not really willing to be involved, would they have access off of that? It looks like it may help Ferguson to have an access off that road,
They could
right?
potentially have access to it, yes.
I don't-
Sorum's really simply got equipment stored out there. That's not to say that they may not have reason to have access sometime in the future. Ferguson, to be quite frank with you, if you're trying to get out of Ferguson, that's a little challenging.
That's exactly what I'm thinking, is that access, if they did that, that would probably help them. I don't see how it helps Sorum much, but that whole street, I think, has been a contentious subject for a long time for a lot of people, and I think it's time we do something and get that thing cleaned up. Thank you.
Thank you, Rusty. Greg?
Well, I think it's important to note that at least one of the property owners was interested in completing this project, that it's not something we're imposing.
No, we have the two retail operations back there certainly are the most interested.
Right.
The Owens property, especially if it turns into a range, there'd probably be some requirement for that development for them to put up money for their frontage. So again, I think for Ferguson, as was mentioned, I think there's certainly some advantages there. There's potential advantages for Sorum in the future. So again, I don't think we're hurting anybody by doing this, and I think we're helping the
Correct.
city overall by finally getting it done.
Very good.
Thank you, Greg. Ty?
And Don, if you don't mind, could you use your pointer to point again to the area that we would be paving? Yes. Okay. All right, thank you.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Eric.
It's basically everything north of O'Reilly Auto Parts on the west side of the road.
Okay, thank you.
Check O'Reilly, yeah. O'Reilly bought them out.
Thank you, Don. Council, I think this is a project that's been a sore spot for us, for not only the property owners as well as us, for quite a few years. So I think this is a worthwhile project. So bring it back to council for a decision. A discussion? Is that it? We don't need any more? All right, council, then we'll move on to city manager and legal. We have a first reading on ordinance number 3, 2014, and ordinance approving amendment of an intergovernmental agreement with Alamosa County approved as ordinance 2013-8 for mutual aid in the provision of AARF firefighting services at the San Luis Valley Regional Airport. Is that you? Who is this? Heather?
That will be me.
Ah, thank you.
Council,
Eric.
you approved an intergovernmental agreement with the county back in October of 2013, and actually had been operating on a less formal agreement with the county ever since, I think it was early spring of 2013, for the provision of aircraft rescue and firefighting services out at the airport. And my understanding, talking with Don Chapman, is that that arrangement has been working very well. They are in constant discussions about how they're tweaking that. One of the things that needed changed from the county perspective was the formal involvement of the airport, whatever they're called, the Airport Control Board, the board that manages the airport out there, formal involvement of them in the intergovernmental agreement. And so in the packet, there is a red line version showing the differences between the amended agreement and the agreement that was approved last year. Primarily, the differences relate to involving the airport board and a little bit more detail on how training of the qualified firefighters is going to work. So Don Chapman has gone through the new provisions with the county. Both parties are amenable to them, and the county has approved the amended agreement, so it's in front of you just for first reading tonight. There'll be a public hearing and second reading of the ordinance at your following meeting. Hopefully, the amendment will be in place before the next FAA inspection, which is coming up, I believe, on April 7th.
Thank you, Eric. Council, we have any questions of Eric? Comments? See a lot of red ink here, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
There is a fair amount of red ink, but again, it pretty much just goes to the addition of the airport board and some specification on how training and inspection of the equipment will be handled as well.
Thank you, Council. Do you have any more discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
I would go with alternative 1, approve the ordinance on first reading and set it for a public hearing.
Okay, could you give us the date, Michael? 2nd of April? The 2nd of, Mike, you want to include that in your motion, the date for the public hearing
That would be 2nd of April.
at 7 o'clock?
I'll second that.
I'll second that. I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, council, start voting. Judy?
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, council. Next up are committee reports. Who's got a committee report?
I have a brief committee report. I met with the San Luis Valley Development Resource Group this past Monday, and went over some of their plans and their goals and the vision that they have for this upcoming year. I'll be meeting further with Mike Wisdom tomorrow to share his thoughts and ideas on how we can continue to work together as a team with them. And I'll keep you posted.
Thank you, Ty. Anyone else?
I have one, Joseph.
Rusty?
Attended my first County Tourism Development and Local Marketing District Board. Very interesting group. I got the best meeting. It was the grant fund request night. So we started about 4:30, and I think I got out there about 9:30. So it was a great introduction to that group. Didn't get much business-wise, just the grant applications, and they had 19 different groups present grants or asking for grant funding, and it looks like they took care of all of them fairly well. And that is basically what they did that night. If you want any detailed information on the way they divvied stuff up and stuff, contact me and I'll be happy to share it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rusty. Greg?
Yes, the golf board meets tomorrow evening. The golf course is now open as of March 1st. It's a good time to go out there and have some springtime golfing. It's always challenging with the weather, the wind, and occasional snowstorms, so I encourage everyone to try that. The restaurant is currently closed. Hopefully it will be open as soon as next Wednesday. We'll decide on that probably tomorrow. So that's all I have on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone else? Thank you, council. We'll move on to staff announcements.
During Randy's presentation, we discussed that we are doing an update to the county commissioners next Wednesday, the 26th. I didn't know at this point if there is a council member or two that would like to join us just to help for continuation purposes from the discussions that started during breakfast.
I think that Councilor Johnson wanted to attend. Anyone else?
At what time did you say that was?
Right now, they gave me a time period of between 10 and 12. I'm going to try to get a more narrow time frame of when we might expect to be on the agenda. It's Wednesday, the 26th.
At this point, I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
You could put me down also, Heather.
Is there going to be a conflict, Eric, with more than 2 councilors attending that meeting? No?
As Judy says, you just give notice.
Okay. Thank you. Ty, Greg, Rusty?
Great.
And I will not be here
Okay.
that week.
Okay. And I will try to get a more specific time frame and see what I can do and reach out to you with that information.
Shall we
Last-
make it 4?
Unfortunate.
I'd like
Oh,
to
you
go.
would like to attend as well? Okay. Perfect. The other announcement I wanted to provide is, I think I've been trying to keep you aware of the discussions that the Senior Center has had on if they are interested in what they want to do with their building, if they want to continue to own the facility, or if they would like to partner with the city and have the city own it and lease it back to them. They held a membership meeting last week, and at that point in time, it was told to me that they did vote in favor of telling their board to pursue those discussions. Their next board meeting is next week, Tuesday, the 25th. I do plan to attend to see what decision their board makes, and that would just simply start the discussion with city staff on what the details might potentially look like. So it's nothing that is set in stone. It's nothing that staff may even end up recommending. It's something that just, we wanted to make sure before we went over the details that they had the support of their membership. So that discussion will continue next Tuesday on the 25th.
Heather, I'm on that board. Do you recommend that I show up for that?
Yes,
meeting?
yes, I do.
Thank you, Heather. Any other staff members? Judy?
I'll jump in briefly.
Oh, okay,
Just-
thank you.
Just to update you, the annexation agreement for the People's Place annexation has been signed by the county and now by the city, so that is done and in place. That
Okay.
annexation is now complete.
Thank you, Eric. Judy?
I have some schedule requests for you first. Get my calendar open so I can look at the same thing. I have just begun the annual recruitment for advisory board members. You have 12 potential seats open on all of your advisory boards. 9 of those are currently filled and 3 are ongoing vacancies. So those who have incumbents, the incumbents may choose to request to be reappointed or not, and then we'll accept applications for new members as well. So depending on the number of applicants we get, I would recommend doing those interviews on an off-council night. So what I would ask you for tonight is just some date options. That would be the end of April or first part of May. Those would be good Wednesdays, yes. Actually, yeah, you could do that because Planning Commission will be in here on the 23rd, but you could use the jury room.
You say April 23rd?
April what? May 14th.
I would hope to have these on your agenda for the May 21st meeting for action. So the 14th may push that a little bit, although it's possible.
April 23rd looks good with me.
You, and you have 5 Wednesdays in April, so you could also consider the 30th.
The 30th of April?
30th, fine.
April 30th.
That's a Wednesday.
No comment. No comment.
April 30th works for me. Michael?
April 30th. Would you like to start at 6?
6 o'clock in the evening?
We could leave that time open until we know how many people you're interviewing, if you have a preference. I'll pencil it in at 6 o'clock. The other thing I'd like to get on your schedule, we've talked for some time about liquor license authority training. That's training for you on what you need to know as an authority member. And I put it off for a while because the state kept telling me that they were going to revive that, and they have not. So I am just going to get that done for you before I am gone. My hope is that I can do that close enough to my end date so that whoever replaces me can attend that training also. So with that all in mind, I'm looking at sometime the week of April 14th or the 21st of April. April 14th is a regular meeting week.
And what day did you say that had to be on?
It doesn't have to be on any particular day. I'm just trying to get it as close as I can to the end of my time here. When the state does it, it's a 6-hour training. I can give you the crash course in 2. Probably, yes.
It's for the accelerated learners.
That's it. You know, the difference would be the level of detail that you're given, and I can do it either way, whatever you would like.
I'm good.
What day was that?
A little more.
14th
Of April? I'm fine with that as well.
What were you liking? What date?
I guess 14th to 18th? Is any night?
I would probably prefer to just keep it on Wednesdays on the 16th. That's okay.
You have a regular council meeting on the 16th.
Well, that won't work.
Unless you want to move into a more of a daytime time slot, which is difficult for some.
How about Monday night?
Monday, the 14th was looking attractive to me.
That looks good to me.
Okay, looks good.
Okay, April 14, and I will start that at 6 PM also.
6 PM?
Try not to keep you here more than 3 hours, how about that?
Thank you, Judy.
The other scheduled change is your special meeting that you have scheduled next Monday for the purpose of interviewing city council applicants. We had that starting at 3 o'clock. I would propose that we change that to 2:30, simply because the first interviewee is going to be sitting in front of you at 3 o'clock. I think you'd probably like a little time to get comfortable and get settled in, and we can give you an overview of the process prior to that first person. Does that sound good?
Council? Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
Okay. And one more thing that I have is a reminder on the CML Annual Conference. I've gotten responses from 3 of you on your choices. I have rooms for all of you. What I need now is your choices of meals and events. So as we know, those fill up pretty fast, so get that to me ASAP.
There's still rooms open.
They're filling up fast.
There are? I mean, I don't know because everybody's gotten their room filled.
I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Any other staff announcements? Seeing none, we'll move on to that's a local licensing authority. And we've got consent calendar B. Early Iron Club Incorporated Special Events Permit, August 29, 30, and 31 of 2014. Council, discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
If there's no other discussion, I motion we approve consent calendar B.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, start voting, please. I'm missing one. Thank you. Judy?
The motion carries unanimously.
We'll move on to council comment. Council?
I think we all received the paper from Mr. Myers on deer. I would like to propose that we discuss that at our summer retreat. Council's interested.
I'll place that on the agenda as a discussion item. Any other council comment? Rusty? Go ahead.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Oakes. Very smooth transition. It almost was unnoticeable that in the interim position, you're doing a terrific job, and the transition was smooth, and I like smooth. Thank you. Also, I'd like to thank Pat, Amanda, and Heather for their involvement in the Economic Development Group. I think this is kind of something that has been flying under the radar for us, and you guys have put in a tremendous amount of time and effort, and I do thank you for that, and I think it's a group that we really need, and I think we'll benefit from it, so thank you for all your help. And Jim, for keeping Channel 10 online as much as you can, thanks.
Thank you, Rusty. Michael?
I would like to thank the city for sending us on these CML meetings. Thank you, Judy, for staying on top of our hotel rooms and all that, keeping us informed. It's a really neat learning experience. I got to go to 2 of them so far, and it was really great to go, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else? If not, I don't really have a comment. I just want to thank you for being here this evening. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.